A nameless grave, a decades-old mystery, and a breakthrough that finally brings answers. In the quiet town of Pecan Valley, a cold case that haunted investigators for nearly 25 years has just cracked wide open. The man once known only as John Doe has a name, Marcus Rutledge. But how did he vanish without a trace in 1998? And why did it take a quarter of a century to uncover the truth? It began with a chill in the air, the kind that seeps into your bones. November 12, 2001. Dawn had just broken over Pecan Valley, casting long shadows through the skeletal trees of Black Pine Woods. Two hikers, trekking off-trail near the town's crumbling railroad tracks, spotted something unnatural in the dirt. A patch of earth too disturbed. A shallow grave, barely covered by rotting leaves and gnarled roots clawing at the soil. Inside that grave lay a skeleton. Not intact, not peaceful, fragmented. A skull fractured near the temple. A rusted belt buckle, no initials. Jeans bleached by time and weather. No wallet. No ID. Just bones. Sheriff's deputies arrived within the hour. They combed the area for clues, but the woods gave up nothing. No tire tracks. No discarded weapons. No shred of fabric besides the decayed clothes on the body. Even the elements seemed to conspire against them. The previous night's rain had washed away any footprints. Forensic anthropologists later estimated the man had been buried there for at least 3 years. That placed his death around 1998. But when investigators scoured missing persons databases, nothing matched. Not his height, not his dental records, not the faint scar tissue on his left femur, likely from a childhood accident. For months, they chased leads that evaporated like fog. A trucker claimed he'd seen a man arguing near the tracks in '98, but his description was vague. A local farmer recalled an out-of-towner asking about work that same year. Dead ends, all of them. By 2003, the case file grew dusty. The remains were labeled Pecan Valley John Doe and stored in a coroner's cabinet. No family came forward. No headlines demanded justice. Just a silent question, echoing for decades. Who is this man? And why did nobody seem to miss him? Marcus Rutledge wasn't a ghost. Not yet. In the fall of 1998, he was a 28-year-old construction worker with calloused hands and a laugh that could fill a room. A man who packed peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day. A father who tucked his 4-year-old daughter, Emily, into bed each night with the same promise. See you in the morning, sunshine. But on November 3, 1998, Marcus left his home in Brookside County, a 2-hour drive from Pecan Valley, and vanished. Co-workers at the job site that day said he'd seemed normal. A little tired, maybe. He'd mentioned driving to Pecan Valley after his shift for a quick job. Cash work, he'd called it. Gotta get Emily something nice for Christmas, he'd joked. His truck, a battered '92 Ford pickup, was last seen turning onto Old Mill Road just after 5:30 p.m. He never came home. His wife, Clara, reported him missing the next morning. Police found his truck 3 days later, abandoned in a Walmart parking lot 20 miles outside Pecan Valley. The keys were still in the ignition. A half-empty coffee cup sat in the holder. His tool belt lay neatly on the passenger seat, still strapped, still waiting. For months, detectives chased shadows. They interviewed every contractor in Pecan Valley. No one had hired Marcus. No one remembered seeing him. The quick job he'd mentioned? It didn't exist. Or if it did, the person who offered it left no trace. Friends described Marcus as a man who kept to himself but never missed a bill. Quiet but not secretive. A hard worker who'd taken extra shifts to save for Emily's braces. He'd have walked through fire for that little girl, his foreman told police. So why did he lie about the job? Was it a cover for something darker? A debt? A deal gone wrong? Or did someone else fabricate the story to lure him into those woods? The only certainty is this. When Marcus Rutledge left Brookside County that November evening, he was a father, a husband, a man with a name. By sunrise, he'd become a question mark, one that would take 25 years to unravel. In the silence of a coroner's office, a skeleton speaks. Not with words, but with isotopes. With fractures, with the faintest traces of DNA clinging to a molar. For over 2 decades, Pecan Valley's John Doe whispered clues no one could decipher. Until science finally learned to listen. It started in 2003. Forensic anthropologists reconstructed the skull, layer by painstaking layer, using clay and guesswork. The result? A face plastered on posters across 3 states. A man with a square jaw, a crooked nose, and eyes that stared emptily from gas stations and post offices. Do you know this man? The flyers pleaded. The public shrugged. Tips trickled in, a drifter from Arkansas, a runaway from Texas, but none matched the bones. By 2010, investigators turned to isotopes. They drilled into a femur, testing oxygen and strontium levels trapped in the bone. The verdict? John Doe had spent his childhood in the Midwest, likely Missouri or Kansas, before migrating south. They scoured school yearbooks, military drafts, and high school sports teams. Again, nothing. Then, in 2015, a Hail Mary. Detectives extracted degraded DNA from a tooth root. They ran it through CODIS, the FBI's criminal database. No hits, no familial matches, just another dead end. It felt like the woods were laughing at us, one investigator later admitted. Like the truth didn't want to be found. But in 2022, a flicker of hope. A second cousin in Oklahoma spit into a tube. A DNA test for a lark to trace her family's Cherokee roots. When her results hit GEDmatch, a public genealogy database, an alert pinged on a detective's desk at 2:13 a.m. Partial match. 4.3% shared DNA with John Doe. Suddenly, the puzzle had edges. Investigators built a family tree backward, through census records, obituaries, and dusty county marriage licenses. They pruned branches for 3 months, chasing a single name that kept resurfacing. Rutledge. A lineage of farmers, mechanics, and one missing link. Marcus, last seen in 1998. But to confirm it, they needed teeth. In October 2023, a backhoe tore into the earth of Pecan Valley's Potter's Field, where John Doe had been buried in a pauper's grave. His coffin, rotted and rusted, emerged from the mud. Forensic dentists compared the molars to Marcus's childhood records. A cavity here, a filling there. A perfect match. On January 18, 2024, the sheriff called Marcus's 78-year-old mother, Doris. "We found your son," he said. She didn't cry. Not at first. "I knew he wasn't the type to leave us," she whispered. Not his girl. But the victory was bittersweet. The bones still held their darkest secret. How did Marcus die? The skull fracture suggested violence, a blow from a blunt object. But was it an accident? A fight? A deliberate act? No weapon was ever found. No suspect named. Even now, the belt buckle and jeans, tagged as evidence #001-98, sit in a vault, waiting for technology that doesn't yet exist to tell the rest of the story. For 25 years, Marcus Rutledge was a ghost in the system. Today, he's a name on a death certificate. But the man he was, the father who packed peanut butter sandwiches, the husband who kissed his wife goodbye that November morning, remains trapped in the shadows, waiting for one last answer. There's a special kind of hell reserved for families of the missing. A limbo where grief has no grave, hope has no expiration date, and every phone ring could be the call. For 25 years, Marcus Rutledge's family lived there, trapped between mourning and waiting, love and rage, until the day science finally set them free. Emily Rutledge was 4 years old when her father vanished. A little girl with pigtails and a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Whiskers. She remembers the last time she saw him. The scratch of his stubble against her cheek, the smell of sawdust on his flannel shirt, the way he paused in the doorway to wink at her. Be good for Mama, sunshine. By 6, she'd started hiding in closets during school pickup, praying her dad would appear like the other parents. By 12, she'd lie awake inventing stories. Maybe he's a spy. Maybe he lost his memory. By 16, she stopped saying his name aloud. I'd hear my friends complain about their dads forgetting a soccer game or yelling about curfew. Emily told investigators last week, her voice steady but brittle. And I'd give anything to be annoyed by mine. Her mother, Clara, weathered a different storm. For years, she kept Marcus's side of the bed untouched, his pillow unfluffed, his alarm clock still set for 5:30 a.m. She left porch lights burning all night, just in case. When the phone rang, she'd sprint to answer it, breathless, only to slump at another telemarketer's pitch. The worst part wasn't the not knowing, Clara said in a 2005 interview, unearthed from police archives. It was the maybes. Maybe he left us. Maybe he's hurt. Maybe he's... Her voice trails off in the recording, swallowed by static. Then, in 2010, a false dawn. A trucker in Nevada swore he'd seen Marcus pumping gas outside Reno. Clara and Emily drove 14 hours, hearts pounding, only to confront a stranger with Marcus's height and build, but not his eyes. That man looked right through me, Clara later wrote in her journal. Like I was a ghost. Emily's teenage years became a minefield. Mother-daughter fights erupted over burnt casseroles or missed curfews, displaced rage masquerading as rebellion. I blamed her, Emily admits now. Not because I thought she drove him away, because she stayed, because she made me stay too. Meanwhile, in a nursing home 200 miles away, Marcus's mother, Doris, waged her own war. Each morning, she'd dial the sheriff's office, same time, same question. Any news? Deputies knew her voice by heart. "Ma'am, we'll call you," they'd say gently. She'd hang up, then reheat the same pot of coffee, staring at Marcus's high school graduation photo taped to her fridge. In 2018, dementia began to blur Doris's world. She'd forget her own address, her nurse's name, the year. But not Marcus. "Where's my boy?" She'd demand, pounding her walker against the floor. "You're hiding him." Some nights, she'd pack a suitcase with his childhood sweaters, convinced he was coming home for Thanksgiving. Then, on January 18th, 2024, the call came. Clara was at work, restocking shelves at the Brookside County Library, when her phone buzzed. Emily, now a paramedic, was halfway through a 24-hour shift, stitching a gash on a teenager's forehead. Doris sat in her nursing home cafeteria, pushing peas around a plate. "It's him," the detective said. Clara collapsed into the philosophy section, her knees giving out as she clutched a copy of the Odyssey, a book Marcus had always meant to read. Emily froze, her gloves slick with blood, and whispered, "Oh God, oh God, oh God," like a prayer. Doris just nodded, her hands steady for the first time in years. "I knew," she said. "I always knew. But closure, they'd learn, isn't a blanket. It's a threadbare quilt full of holes." At the coroner's office, Emily held her father's belt buckle, the one found buried with him, crusted with decades of dirt. "I thought I'd scream or cry," she said, "but I just studied it. Like if I stared long enough, I'd see the last time he touched it." Clara requested the case file. She spent nights poring over autopsy photos, toxicology reports, and the faded Polaroid of Marcus's truck. "I needed to know everything," she said, "even the parts that kept me awake." Doris, lucid in her grief, asked one thing, to wash Marcus's bones herself. No mother should bury her child in a box, she insisted. The coroner refused, citing protocol. So she settled for pressing her palm against the bag holding his skull, her tears streaking the plastic. "There's my boy," she murmured. On the day of Marcus's funeral, March 2nd, 2024, the family gathered under a steel-gray sky. Emily wore a locket with Marcus's photo, a gift he'd meant to give her on her 5th birthday. Clara read a letter she'd written him in 1999, her voice cracking at the line, "Emily lost her first tooth today." She said the tooth fairy wouldn't come unless you did too. Doris sat silent, clutching a dried corsage from his high school prom. Afterward, reporters asked Emily if she felt peace. "Peace isn't the word," she said. "It's like, for 25 years I was stuck in a dark room, feeling the walls for a door. Now I'm out, but the sun's too bright, the air's too cold, and I'm still alone." As for Clara, she visits Marcus's grave every Sunday. She doesn't bring flowers, just a peanut butter sandwich, wrapped in wax paper, left beside the headstone. A ritual only they'd understand. And Doris? She keeps his death certificate folded in her Bible, next to his baby footprints. When the dementia fog rolls in, she sometimes asks the nurses, "Has Marcus called yet?" But now they can answer honestly. He's home, Doris. He's finally home. A name on a headstone, a body laid to rest. But for those who knew Marcus Rutledge, the puzzle is only half solved. Because here's the truth. Identity is not justice. Knowing who he was doesn't explain why he died alone in the dirt, his bones left to rot under a canopy of pines. And until those questions are answered, Pecan Valley's darkest secret remains alive. Let's start with the facts. Marcus's truck was found abandoned in a Walmart parking lot on November 6, 1998. Keys in the ignition. No signs of struggle. No blood. Just a cold cup of coffee and a faded receipt for gas purchased 30 miles north of Pecan Valley. But Black Pine Woods, where his body was buried, is a 90-minute hike from that parking lot through dense, pathless forest. So how did he get there? Did he meet someone that night? Follow them willingly? Or was he forced? Detectives have two theories. Theory 1, the wrong place, wrong time accident. A local hunter, now deceased, once told police he'd heard shouts near the railroad tracks on November 3, 1998, the night Marcus vanished. Could he have stumbled onto a drug deal, a poaching operation, or a property dispute? Maybe he saw something he shouldn't have. A panicked confrontation. A shovel swung in the dark. A body dragged into the woods. But if so, why leave his truck in plain sight? Why not ditch it in a river or torch it? Theory 2, the premeditated lie. Marcus told co-workers he was headed to Pecan Valley for a quick job. But no one hired him. No invoices, texts, or witnesses corroborate that claim. Was the job a ruse? Did someone lure him there? Someone he knew or thought he knew? A former employer? A estranged friend? The belt buckle found on his body offers no clues. It was mass-produced, sold at a Sears in Memphis in 1992. Then there's the fracture. The skull fracture above Marcus's left temple, jagged, deep, and fatal. Forensic anthropologists confirm it was caused by a blunt object, likely a rock or hammer. But here's the catch. The fracture shows no signs of healing, meaning it happened at or near the time of death. So was it murder or a tragic fall? Detective Harlan Voss, who inherited the case in 2010, leans toward violence. Accidental deaths don't end with shallow graves, he says. Someone buried him. Someone who knew those woods. But who? In 2024, the list of suspects is thinner than ever. Jerry McAllister, a now-dead drifter who'd been squatting in an abandoned cabin near Black Pine Woods in 1998. Neighbors called him unstable, but harmless. Louisa Carter, a disgraced real estate agent who'd been accused of forging land deeds near Pecan Valley. She died in a car crash in 2003. The Miller brothers, two siblings who ran a moonshine operation in the woods until 2001. Both are serving life sentences for an unrelated murder. All leads, all dead ends. Then there's the mystery of the gas station clerk. In 1998, a clerk at the now-demolished Quick Stop on Route 9 told police a man matching Marcus's description bought a pack of Marlboros and a map of Pecan Valley around 6:15 p.m. on November 3rd. But when detectives re-interviewed him in 2004, he'd suffered a stroke and couldn't recall the encounter. He died 2 years later, taking whatever he saw or didn't see to his grave. Even the land itself betrays the truth. Black Pine Woods was clear-cut in 2010 for a failed housing development. The railroad tracks? Torn up and sold for scrap. The Walmart parking lot? Now a bustling shopping plaza. Every physical landmark from Marcus's final hours has been erased. But not all evidence is gone. In March 2024, forensic botanists analyzed soil samples from Marcus's grave. Buried in the dirt were traces of henbane, a toxic plant linked to ancient poisons and folk remedies. It grows sporadically in Black Pine Woods, but why was it in his grave? Was it accidental? Or a macabre signature? The Rutledge family has theories of their own. Emily believes her father was silenced. He was too careful to wander into the woods alone, she says. Someone wanted him quiet. Clara wonders if it was a grudge from his past, a fight he never mentioned, a debt he couldn't repay. Doris, ever the pragmatist, thinks it was just bad luck. But Pecan Valley's old-timers whisper darker tales. At the town's VFW hall, a Vietnam vet named Frankie Cole swears he saw Marcus arguing with a suit outside the post office days before he vanished. Fancy car, out-of-state plates, Frankie claims. Never saw the guy before or since. Detectives dismissed it as bourbon-fueled paranoia, until a 2002 parking ticket surfaced in the case file. A Lexus with New York plates was ticketed outside the Pecan Valley Diner on November 2nd, 1998. The driver? Unknown. The car? Untraceable. So where does that leave us? In April 2024, a task force began re-examining 1,400 pages of case files with AI tools, flagging overlooked names and connections. They're also testing the henbane residue for saliva or skin cells, hoping to extract DNA from a 25-year-old plant. But time is the enemy. Memories fade, evidence degrades, and the people who know the truth, they're either silent, dead, or buried themselves. As for Marcus's belt buckle, it's locked in an evidence vault, its rusted metal still caked with Pecan Valley's dirt, a riddle wrapped in decay. The hardest truth is this: some stories don't end. They just stop. Marcus Rutledge has his name back. His grave has flowers. His daughter has answers, but not the answer. And in the shadows of Black Pine Woods, the wind still carries the echo of a question no one can hear. Who killed Marcus Rutledge? Until next time, stay curious. A name is more than letters on a page. It's a heartbeat, a story, a bridge between the living and the lost. For 25 years, Marcus Rutledge was a whisper swallowed by the wind, until science, stubbornness, and a family's refusal to forget dragged it back into the light. This is the story of how one man's legacy outlived his death, and why every John Doe deserves to be more than a question mark. The weight of a name. On March 2nd, 2024, 3 words were etched into a weathered granite headstone: Marcus Allen Rutledge. Simple, unadorned, but to his daughter, Emily, those letters were a revolution. Growing up, I hated introducing myself, she admits. Rutledge felt like a lie, like I was carrying a ghost. Now, when she says it aloud, her voice doesn't waver. It's his name, but it's mine too. Finally, it's ours again. For decades, Marcus existed in fragments: a half-remembered lullaby, a dusty tool belt, a face in a prom photo fading to yellow. No birthday candles blown out, no graveside flowers, just silence. But in the wake of his identification, something unexpected happened. The fragments began to reassemble. A former co-worker mailed Clara a VHS tape he'd found in his attic, a 1997 company picnic. There's Marcus, flipping burgers in a Star Wars apron, grinning as Emily clings to his leg, ice cream smeared on her chin. A high school friend sent Doris a crumpled love note Marcus wrote to Clara in 1988. "You're the reason I believe in dumb stuff like fate. P.S. Don't show this to anyone." Even the case file itself became a mosaic, not just of death, but of life. "He wasn't perfect," Emily says. "He forgot my kindergarten play because he was working overtime. He burned toast every single morning, but he was real, and now so am I." The ripple effect. Marcus's story did more than rewrite his own ending. It reignited the hunt for other ghosts in Pecan Valley's past. In April 2024, the sheriff's office reopened 12 cold cases linked to unidentified remains. A volunteer group began digitizing moldering yearbooks and obituaries, cross-referencing them with national databases. And in a quiet act of rebellion, Emily tattooed her father's initials, MAR, on her wrist, a talisman against oblivion. But the truest legacy lies in the unlikeliest of places: a 4th-grade classroom in Brookside County. After Emily spoke to students about her father's case, a boy named Jacob approached her, trembling. "My grandpa's been missing since before I was born," he said. "Do you think they'll find him too?" She knelt eye to eye and told him what she wished someone had told her at 9. "You don't have to stop waiting, but you don't have to wait alone." 2 weeks later, Jacob's class wrote letters to the state forensics lab, demanding justice for his grandfather. 6 months later, those letters landed on the desk of a genetic genealogist, and another John Doe got his name back. The unbroken chain. Doris Rutledge died on May 14th, 2024, just shy of her 80th birthday. In her final days, she kept Marcus's baby blanket draped over her legs, finger-combing its frayed edges like she was soothing the child he'd once been. Her last coherent words were to a hospice nurse: "Tell Emily, the story doesn't end here." It doesn't. Every Sunday, Clara still brings a peanut butter sandwich to Marcus's grave. But now Emily joins her, sometimes with her own toddler, a curly-haired girl named Lucy, who points at the headstone and babbles, "Gampa." And in Pecan Valley, where the woods have been stripped to stumps, a single pine still stands near the old railroad tracks. Its trunk is carved with initials, M+C, inside a lopsided heart. Tourists assume it's teenage graffiti, but Clara knows the truth. She placed Marcus's hand there in 1992, guiding the knife as he laughed. This is so cheesy. The scar has widened over the years, the bark swallowing the letters. But the tree grows. So does the story. The final truth: Marcus Rutledge's life wasn't extraordinary. He never won awards, wrote books, or made headlines, until he became one. But in the end, his ordinariness is what makes his legacy profound. He was a man who packed lunches, who forgot anniversaries, who loved his family imperfectly, fiercely, and forever. And because of that, he's become a beacon for the nameless, the forgotten, the ones whose stories are still trapped in the dark. As for Emily, she keeps his toolbox in her garage. The wrenches are rusted, the tape measure stuck at 7 feet. Sometimes, when Lucy naps, she opens it just to breathe in the smell of aged leather and motor oil. "It's him," she says, "not his ghost, just him." Because that's the thing about names, they're not magic. They don't reverse time or erase pain, but they anchor us, to the past, to each other, to the unyielding hope that no one is ever truly lost. So the next time you pass a cemetery, a cold case billboard, or a weathered missing poster, remember, behind every unknown name is a Marcus, a Clara, an Emily, a story waiting to be reclaimed. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and never stop saying their names aloud. In the quiet woods of Pecan Valley, the earth still guards its secrets. But Marcus Rutledge's name no longer sleeps in the dark.